My name is William Lee, and yes, that is my government name. And basically, I'm here to tell the masses out there what it's like to be a Gnostic, what Gnosticism is about, and essentially take the fear out of Gnosticism, because Gnosticism really has been given a bad name, a bad label from various corporate religions out there, and I feel like it's time to really set the record straight. So I'm back as a master in the martial art of Gnosticism, formally representing Gnosticism as myself being a Gnostic, and I'm really going to break it down and explain what it is, explain the history, explain everything in an amalgamation of sorts on what it's like to be a Gnostic, what does Gnosticism mean, the terminology, everything. So if you're out there and you're unclear of what it means or what it takes to be a Gnostic, really tune in, key in, and listen, because I'm going to load your boat with information. And I know in our modern day era, we love to reinforce information with scholarship. So towards the end of this message, I'm going to be giving you books and various references that you can go to. If you don't specifically want to just believe my word for it, you can go and read it and look up the information for yourself. Because part of being a Gnostic is about diligently researching information, studying for yourself, studying to show thyself approved. Okay, so without further ado, today is June 10th, 2014, according to the Gregorian calendar, and this is all about Gnosticism. Some call me the Grim Reaper, some call me the Bad News Bearer, because I tend to bring information that doesn't tickle your eardrums. I tend to bring information that's real, information that's hard, information that's quite sad, to be honest with you, but it's what needs to be promoted. Because oftentimes when we look at our modern day age of entertainment, we like things that are pleasing to us, things that make us laugh, things that bring joy to our lives. But you have to understand that this is a part of a matrix. We live in a matrix, and part of this matrix is lulling you to sleep, pacifying you. Okay, so this is not going to be pacifying to you. It's not going to tickle your eardrums. So if you're looking for something like that, this is the wrong place. This is the information that I'm putting out is real. It's direct. It's hard. It's sad. It's rude. It directly confronts modern day corporate religion, and it should, because modern day corporate religion is a fraud that's basically designed to make money and gain power off of your ignorance. So basically, without further ado, I'm really going to get into it, okay? And yeah, without further ado, I'm really going to get into it. Now, Gnosticism. Gnosticism is more or less a current term, okay? And it comes from the Greek. I don't want to say ancient Greek, because ancient Greek really isn't that ancient to begin with, but it comes from the Greek meaning learned, one who is learned, one who has knowledge, gnosis, okay? And Gnosticism basically describes or encompasses a collection of ancient information, ancient esoteric information that taught that people, the initiates, should really shun the material world. And the material world is the matrix. It's what you see. It's the Internal Revenue Service, the Federal Reserve. Okay, it's bankers, law. It encompasses all of that. Okay, that which takes the power from the people and invest it into the interests of a few. Okay, now basically Gnosticism, it teaches that people, rightly so, should shun the material world that was created by the demiurge and embrace the spiritual world and get in tune with the spiritual world. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean standing and spinning on your head, practicing what you think is a form of yoga, but it's deeper than that, okay? Now, Gnostic ideas are what influenced all religions, okay, from Christianity, Islam, Egyptology, etc., etc., even going back further than ancient Egypt, even going back further than Atlantis and the Atlanteans, okay? It has always been. Gnosticism has always been, because knowledge has always been. Even in the Bible, it speaks of eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the book of Genesis, okay? So it goes back to the beginning, even according to Christian and Islamic doctrine. It goes back to the beginning of man. So this is something that we really need to take heed to and pay attention to, okay? Now, in Gnosticism, the world of the demiurge is represented by the lower world, okay, which is associated with our world, matter, flesh, time, and more particularly an imperfect, ephemeral world, okay? Now, the word demiurge means a worker, okay? A worker, a laborer, all right? Now, the world of the divine is represented by, or it's the world of the divine is the upper world, and it symbolizes perfection. Okay, it's associated with spirit, the higher mind, soul, perfection. And even dealing with soul also has a link and a connection to this world. So it even transcends the soul. It is utter perfection. The world of the divine is eternal, and it's not part of this physical matrix. It's impalpable, and time doesn't exist there as we tend to observe the element of time here. And to rise to even the realm of the aeons, which are the higher gods, being a Gnostic, the Gnostic must reach the knowledge which mixes everything from philosophy, metaphysics, cultural knowledge, history, and the secrets of history, or the secrets of the universe, rather, okay? So this is really important, all right? Now, many people in modern day religion say God. They say they believe in God. But who is God? Who is God? According to the Gnostic, the true God is not a personal being, but it's an energy field that manifests itself through the personification of itself in masculine and feminine energies, okay? Metaphorically, electricity and magnetism. As magnetism is to electricity, likewise, masculine adheres to, or the feminine adheres to the masculine principle, all right? Now, the pleroma is the completeness, and it's androgynous, okay? The masculine energy, which is the force, coupled with thought or wisdom, which wisdom, according to the Bible, is personified in the feminine, okay, brings forth manifestation, all right? The masculine and the feminine, when they both come together and form a union, brings forth manifestation, all right? Now, with the manifestation, it embodies or has the potential to embody both masculine and feminine aspects, okay? Which the manifestation of the divine pleroma, of the androgynous divine, was manifested in the form of lesser gods. Okay, so you have many lesser gods that had their genesis or their origin from this divine energy androgynous pool. Okay, now this divine energy created lesser gods known as aeons. Okay, and these aeons do have a gender and were created in pairs, with each pair representing the masculine and the feminine principle. Okay, the pleroma is the highest realm. The created gods which are your aeons, reside in a lower subsidiary realm, and we below them are on the bottom rung, which is this prison that I am going to call and refer to as the matrix. Okay, now there is a ranking and hierarchy in relation to these gods or aeons. Okay, now Sophia, which is a common personification in Gnosticism, is the lowest aeon, the lowest god. Okay, now like I said, the aeons were paired in masculine and feminine pairs. Now Sophia, which was among the lowest aeon or god, she wanted to create without her masculine counterpart, like the androgynous divine pleroma. Okay, so and this was out of balance. This was out of harmony with the divine. So since she tried to do this on her own, what we have, or the offspring of her trying to create without balance, resulted in the creation of the demiurge. Okay? It resulted in the creation of the demiurge. Now, the demiurge is evil because when the demiurge was created, it was created outside of the natural balance of the masculine and feminine principle. So since it was created outside of the balance of the natural harmony, it was polarized negative. It was polarized, what we commonly refer to as evil, because it was outside of the order. Anything outside of the order of the divine and the divine manifestation, or how manifestation comes about, takes upon itself the label of evil and encompasses the totality of evil because it is directly outside of what is supposed to be. Okay, so this is why the demiurge was, or and is rather, intrinsically evil. All right. Now, this demiurge, when he was created, he was segregated, because he had to be segregated because of his creation, he had to be segregated due to the imbalance that was within him. Okay, and that which is out of balance cannot be in the same jurisdiction of harmony. Okay, they're at two different sides of the spectrum. The polarity is totally different and distinct. Okay, so the demiurge had to be incarcerated in a separate and distinct jurisdiction. Okay, and since he was incarcerated, or placed rather, into a distinct jurisdiction specifically for him, because he was outside of the order, he said that he alone was God, and there was no other God but him, and that he was it, and that he was the Lord of Lords and the King of Kings, and that there was no God besides him. Okay, because in a sense he was right. In a sense he was right, because the jurisdiction that was created for him, he was unique and he was indigenous to that dimension. And what he did was, he, being an aeon, being a lesser god, had the capability of creating. So he used his ability, which was the ability to create, to bring forth subsidiary creations. So some of his first creations were called the Archons. And if you're familiar with Gnosticism, you're familiar with the term Archon, which basically means a public servant or a public worker. Okay, and the demiurge created these public workers, but since he was polarized to be negative, since he was evil, and evil was basically, let me just quickly explain what I mean by evil. Evil is just the opposite side of righteousness. Okay, so whatever is righteous, the opposite of that, or anything that is different from righteousness, will ultimately be labeled as evil, and rightly so, because it is on or in accord with being on the opposite side of that which is righteous. Okay, so the demiurge created archons. He created archons, which are the fallen ones referred to as the Bible speaks of. These are the fallen ones, the fallen gods, the fallen angels, etc., etc. These are what the Bible speaks of, the fallen ones. All right, because since he was initially created out of order, his creations will also be out of order. Okay, and these are your archons. All right, now the archons plus the demiurge created Adam. Okay, created man, created mankind. Now Sophia, which was a higher aeon, saw what was taking place, and knew that this was getting out of control. So she placed a spark of the divine, of order, of balance, of equilibrium into man. So now man has this interesting dynamic. Man itself was created by the demiurge, which is intrinsically evil. That's why in the Bible, it wasn't long before man sinned, or man transgressed, or man committed wickedness, or man murdered and lied and cheated and stole, etc. All right. However, Sophia, which is a name that is given to the feminine aeon, saw that and knew that something had to change. So she invested the divine spark with mankind. Okay, and this divine spark is what's keeping mankind alive, afloat. Okay, because without the divine spark of righteousness, of balance, of equilibrium, we would not be here. We would not be here at all. Okay, so gratitude must be given to that feminine principle for giving us that divine equilibrium, that divine balance. Okay, so now Gnosticism, like I said, it means learned. It means knowledge. It describes a collection of ancient truths, okay, that were taught to people that they should shun the material world that was created by this demiurge and embraced the spiritual world, which is the truth. All right. So, move on. We believe that the way to salvation of our being from the material world, because if the way of salvation is not embracing more and more religions, more and more things of this world. The way to salvation is not gaining but losing. You must lose in order to gain salvation. You cannot gain salvation by gaining religion, by gaining this, by gaining that. The way to gain or achieve salvation is by losing. The more you lose, the more you will gain in relation to salvation. And that is important. All right. Now, we believe that Gnosticism is more than just a religion, but it's salvation in and of itself. It is salvation in and of itself, because knowledge is the way to salvation. It's not religion. It's not belief. It's knowing. And that is what Gnosis is. It's knowing. All right. You see, when Adam and Eve, or Adam and Hawa, were in the garden, or even going back to even Adam, okay, he was taught that he should not, or he was not supposed to eat off the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, as it says in the Bible. And in the day that he eats of it, he will certainly die. Okay, This is in the book of Genesis, all right? He was told to eat off of the tree of life. The tree of life was the tree of perpetual incarceration down here, down in this matrix. Okay, that was life. That was what he was entitled to, was perpetual cycles of servitude down here in this matrix, which is hell, which is purgatory. It is relentless. Okay, now the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is the tree to know. Okay, ask yourself this: in the book of Genesis, in the Bible, God says that Adam should not eat off of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But later on in the Bible, it says, well, because you reject knowledge, I shall do this, this, and that. The Bible contradicts itself so many times, because in the beginning, it was bad to gain knowledge. But towards the end, hey, you had to gain knowledge. So what is it? You see, it's utter confusion. But the truth is that in the beginning, knowledge was prohibited because the people, or more specifically Adam, was to remain in ignorance. And through ignorance is life, just as you see it today. People that are ignorant live wonderful lives. They have homes, they have methods of transportation that are readily available to them. People that are the most ignorant in this matrix are the most provided for. Because in the matrix, it is to the advantage of the archons and the demiurge for you to remain ignorant. If you gain knowledge, if you gain understanding, you will feel persecution. Your life would be hard. Your life will be hard because of it. And believe me, this is the truth. This is reality. Okay? So, going further, we see that the material world is created through basically an intermediary being called the demiurge, who leads the people to believe that he is the highest aeon, aka God. But in all actuality, he or it is an inferior entity that lacks the power of the higher, more righteous aeons. Okay? Now, the demiurge is evil. When you look at the religion of Christianity, Islam, Judaism, etc., they all are worshiping the demiurge, just under a different banner, under a different name. Okay? That's why you see so much violence. That's why you see so many lies and deceitful tactics being instituted upon the masses of society, because the demiurge is essentially evil. Okay? The demiurge is essentially evil. The god of this world is a bitch. Okay? He is evil. He is wicked. And if you don't think so, then ask yourself, well, why is it that my child is so disobedient? Okay? There's a reason why. Look, when a child turns 2 years of age, that 2-year mark is infamously known as the troublesome twos, or the troublesome two. Okay? Where your child just basically just raises hell. And just is extremely disobedient, raises hell. You don't have to cheat a child to lie. You don't have to teach a child to lie. You don't have to teach a child to misbehave. A child will naturally misbehave because a child is naturally a creation of the demiurge, which is polarized towards the opposite side of righteousness. And if it wasn't so, then you wouldn't have to punish them. You wouldn't have to spank them. You wouldn't have to discipline them. You wouldn't have to send your children to time out all the time. You wouldn't have to put your children on medication if it wasn't true. It's just, we don't want to admit it. We don't want to accept it. We want to believe that they're just these blissful angels of ours. And we deny the truth and the reality of what is really going on. When you look at the world, you see murder, you see violence, you see thievery, you see rape, you see everything that can possibly go on. So, going forward, when I speak of the pleroma, okay, the pleroma essentially means the fullness or totality, okay, and bythos is the depth, okay, the depth of it all right, and the emanations from the divine are known as aeons, okay, they're known as aeons. Now, in the Nag Hammadi library, the demiurge is described as a lion-faced serpent, okay? And elsewhere, he's referred to as Adaboeth, or Samael, okay? Meaning blind god, or Sackless, meaning the foolish one, okay? The ignorant god, all right? So, the Archons are those who preside over the material realm, and in some cases, in most cases, I would argue, are the ones that present obstacles to our people, to our beings that seek to ascend. Okay, the Archons are in charge of the laws, the statutes, the codes, the public policy, the origin of the policy enforcers, which are commonly called the police, and their codes, to keep the masses of people in line and keep them ignorant. Okay, there's a reason why lawyers and attorneys exist, and that reason is because they do not want you to learn law. If they did, they would give every citizen of the United States the codes, statutes, regulations, public policy of the United States. But they don't give anybody that. You have to go to a law library and go through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of laws, statutes, codes, and public policy. And who has time to do that? They'd rather just sit on the side of the road and just clock you going too fast and just arrest you for doing whatever. They don't want you to be knowledgeable of the law, because if you were knowledgeable of the law, then you would know how to beat the law. They don't want that to happen because they're gaining revenue off of your ignorance. Anytime you or your family members get in trouble, they make money off of you consulting an attorney. So your ignorance directly profits this system, which this system is a matrix, plain and simple. All right. So let's move on to the soul. Let's talk about the soul, reality, and consciousness. Okay, let's talk about the soul, reality, and consciousness, because I essentially summed up the pleroma, which is the divine pool of androgynous energy. Okay, and from that divine pool of androgynous energy comes the masculine and feminine, what we know as the masculine and feminine principles. Okay, separated. Okay, which those two principles in union create manifestation. Okay, and the manifestation is what frames this matrix, or what gives the potential for our matrix to be framed. It's the demiurge that took those principles, perverted them, and created what we now know as the matrix, which is an illusion. Okay, now the soul. All right, the soul. The soul is distinct from spirit. The soul has basically two primary layers, astral and etheric. Okay, and these terms are they're not really ancient, but I'm just using them because these two terms are more what we are accustomed to hearing. Let me just say, okay? Now, the astral component or astral body is the seat of immediate emotional impressions, subjective biases, passions, and willpower. Okay, now without the astral body, a person would be dim, passive, basically a vegetable due to an absence of internal impressions, emotions, and will. All right, so your soul has two layers: the astral component, which it basically encompasses emotions, biases, passions, etc. All right, now the other aspect of the soul is the etheric component, or the etheric body. And the etheric body is comprised of subtle energy formations, patterns, rhythms, inertias, currents, and structures that vivify, shape, and regulate the physical body. Now, I mean, it would really help to think of it as an energy scaffolding, okay? made of life force. Okay, something that builds upon itself, made of life force. And without the etheric component, the physical body is but a corpse that disintegrates under the influence of entropy. And entropy is basically what happens in relation to time. Things tend towards disorder. Things decay. Things wear out. When people get old, they get slow. They get dumb, etc. Okay, that is all entropy. As things age, make progress, things tend to degenerate, including the human species, which is in the process of feeling entropy, which is feeling the effects of entropy, which is a decrease in intellect, a decrease in IQ, a devolution, if you will. All right, all coming under the banner of entropy. Now, when we look at the demiurge, okay, which is the creator of this world, which, like as I've said, is a malevolent entity, an evil entity, and he's evil in the sense that, and when I say evil, I mean, I'm speaking of an anthropomorphism. Okay, I'm just saying he, because that's what we are readily used to hearing. Okay, but the demiurge is one way to understand the demiurge is to think of it as a world soul. Okay, the Gnostic belief, we believe that the demiurge is basically a soul. It's made up of the same substance as our soul, except it functions as the soul of the universe as a whole. Okay? Or conversely, our own souls are microcosmic instances of the demiurge. Just as if you were to go to a beach, for example, and take a cup of water and dip the cup of water into the beach. All right? That water that is in the cup has the same consistency as the water on the beach. So we do have that aspect, that element of the demiurge within us, because we were created by the demiurge, okay, which gives rise to that sinful nature that the Bible speaks of. When Shaul or Paul in the Bible speaks of being powerless and wanting to do the right thing, but he finds himself doing the wrong thing, but he realizes that it is not him, but it is the sin, the fallen nature that dwelleth within him. He is speaking of that demiurgic tendency towards evil, that polarizing towards the negative away from the positive, okay? And the demiurge uses and knows the frailties of that. So this is where the 10 Commandments comes from. Okay, thou shalt not do this, thou shalt not do that, thou shalt not do that. Because the demiurge knows your powerlessness. So he constructs laws and guidelines, statutes and regulations to keep you enslaved, because he knows that you do not have the power to keep them all. So through these laws, he can enslave you through perpetual prayers and perpetual oblations to him, and keep power going towards him, because he is energized by your passion. Okay, he is energized by that. So he knows what you're capable of, because he is your creator, and he knows what you are incapable of. So he frames the laws of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism to properly reflect your powerlessness. That's why when you talk to Christians that are really honest with themselves, they will tell you, yes, we cannot keep all of the 10 Commandments. It's impossible. That's why we pray. That's why we bow down and worship God and Jesus as our Lord and Savior, because we know in our hearts that we can't keep it by ourselves. That's why they tell you that. Okay? It is manipulation by the demiurge, plain and simple. So moving on. Okay, moving on. The soul is the coupling the soul is the coupling medium between spirit and body. It connects the two. Okay, it provides the intervening layer between spirit and body that allows one to interact with the other. Otherwise, the divide between non-physical and physical reality is too great. Okay, spirit is the core of sentience, knowledge, reflection, free will, and deep self-awareness. Without spirit, a person is nothing more than an automaton programmed by external worldly influences. Without spirit, a person is nothing more than an automaton programmed by external worldly influences. Okay? Now the demiurge. Some are familiar in esoteric philosophies with the term thought form. Some might not. So let me explain it. Okay? And it is helpful because another way to understand the demiurge is to think of it as a world thought form. Thought forms are temporary, non-physical entities created by our thoughts and our emotions. Okay? Which emotions are just energy in motion. All right? Energy in motion. Now, they exist around us in this etheric level of reality because you have differing levels of reality. The etheric level of reality is more how can I explain it? The etheric level of reality is more, it's higher because it's more minute. The particles are more delicate, if you will. All right. Now, thought forms exist around us in this etheric or higher level of reality, less dense reality, let me just say, and are imbued with astral energies corresponding to the emotions that went into them. Okay, they are termed larvae, also in other esoteric systems. Okay, so the energy that you put into a thought goes out into the environment, into specifically the etheric environment, as a thought form. And the more energy you place into these thought forms, the more that they can take upon themselves artificial intelligence, if you will. Okay, so just remember, you have to guard your thoughts. All right, you have to guard your thoughts. All right. Now, everyday thought forms are just energy constructs without any spirit, mind, or body coupled to them. Okay? They're born, like I said, of our own energies and blindly carry out function impressed upon them like obedient automatons. All right? So, a way to think about this demiurge and not really get too confused is that it is just like we are, just like our beings are. Okay, we are elements of thought. Okay, thought coupled with force. Remember, dating back to the first aeons, thought coupled with force creates manifestation. So energy in motion, the energy that you give and the force behind it is what creates thought forms. So be careful of who you think about and what you think about, because these thought forms can go out and actually bring things to fruition and actually make things come to pass. So be careful about what you think about. Okay, and these are how spirits are formed. Okay, spirits are formed according to this manner. Some people, it's just like spirituality. Some people are highly spiritual and some people aren't. Some people have it, some people don't. And it's because of the initial thought and force that was behind the spirit that ultimately led to the creation of your soul, which embodied your body and how you are now living your experience. How you are living your experience now is because of an earlier thought or force that brought you into existence. If it wasn't for thought and earlier thought or force, you would not be experiencing what you're experiencing as a sentient being right now. Okay, now let's talk about the formation of the ego and the soul according to Gnosticism. Okay, the formation of the ego and the soul happens prior to birth. when spirit takes upon itself astral and etheric components. Okay, remember, astral is that which deals with emotion, passion, etc. Etheric is the energy component behind it. All right. And so the formation of the ego and the soul happens prior to birth. Okay, when spirit takes upon itself astral and etheric components and essentially coalesces into a soul and first incarnates into a human embryo. It is, for the most part, without human ego or personality. I'm speaking of the soul. Okay? Then the soul, during the first years of life, through adaptation to physical life as a human being and pollution, earthly pollution, it develops over time. Okay, now the physical prototype, white, black, etc., is what influences ego and personality, because the physical body has its own DNA archetypes. So you have spirit, which is the higher mind, which, when it takes upon astral and etheric components, gives it a unique existence. Then once it inhabits a physical body, the DNA archetypes of that body are what influence personality and ego. The bodily infusion is what leads to common expressions of evil, like babies that throw stuff, disobedient to parents, etc. When babies, like I said, hit 2 years of age, they are infamously referred to as the terrible twos, okay? And it is due to the creation of the physical body by the demiurge, which is evil. Alright? So, let's go further. The ego develops because soul is influenced by the body and through it the world. Physical experiences, 5 functions, and instinctual drives. This is what further shapes and molds the soul. Also, you have social programming as well. Okay? And all of this creates a mask. Okay? What's metaphorically referred to as a mask, carved by all of these worldly influences, which is thus the ego. Okay? Which is negative, because the ego is formed and fashioned through experiences within the matrix and according to fallen nature created by the demiurge. You see, the ego, or the lower intellect, the lower mind, can be seen as an artificial intelligence, an automaton, a computer with personality programmed by genetics and environment. And it also arises partly from the human functions and partly from the portion of the soul molded by worldly and, as I said, bodily factors. Okay, the ego is the streamlined interface through which soul operates proficiently with the physical and social environments. Okay? Now, since ego is what the world extrudes from the soul, and since the world is fundamentally about competition and survival, the ego is likewise preoccupied with physical matters and is inherently survivalistic and self-serving. So when you look at your quest for materialism, your obsession with a job, employment, etc., this corresponds or directly correlates with the impressions that are made upon the ego. The impressions that are made upon the ego. And like I said, by default, it behaves as a self-serving predator. Okay? So when spirit is entirely absent, which is the case in many individuals, or even when the spirit is present but asleep and offering no counter influence, like, for example, if you do have a spirit, if you are a spiritual being, or a being having a spirit rather, and your spirit is asleep, you allowing yourself to be led by your lower instinctual nature, then ego is the only intelligence running the show. And if ego is the only intelligence running the show, then you will be preoccupied with sex, power, and survivalistic tendencies. Okay? Now, let's look at the nature of the ego slash intellect. The nature of the ego slash intellect. What separates average humans from animals is that we have ego, we have intellect, we have mind and personality, all facets of the same thing essentially. The ego is basically an extrusion of the soul. Since both humans and animals have souls, why don't animals have intellect? Animals don't have intellect because the formation of ego depends upon worldly influences that reach the soul through the body, okay? And since animal bodies are less evolved, since their brains are really simpler and lack the higher cortical functions, the ego-forming influences never reach the animal's soul, and so the full ego never forms, okay? The same goes for certain types of mental retardation in humans. Through ego or intellect, we can model the world internally. We can turn it over in our minds, relive the past, fantasize, imagine, daydream, construct language, perform abstract calculations, and essentially engage in complicated lines of reasoning. These abilities all owe themselves to one defining feature of intellect, that its output can become its own input. All right? So, the intellect's ability for true memory involves reliving the past internally by calling it up and observing it internally. And likewise, it can visualize the future through the same inward observation. For average animals, memory is purely associative en route, okay, instead of imaginal. All right? They lack the self-referential internal feedback loop. They lack the ability to imagine and fantasize and observe their own thoughts and extensively really relive them, turn them over, and analyze them. Okay? You see, as such, the intellect is basically a soliton within the soul. In physics, solitons are waves that circulate within themselves and recycle their energy instead of really dispersing it instantly back into the environment. You see, like a smoke ring. If you blow a smoke ring, for example, okay, it really circulates within itself. Okay, it's not like just blowing smoke out into the atmosphere. Okay, it's a similar principle. All right, so the soul is also influenced by spirit, not just body. See, the soul is unique in that it's influenced by either spirit or body. Okay, and if you do not have a spirit, then your soul is directly influenced by the body, and because it's influenced by the body, and because of the body being immersed within the matrix, it would eventually and consequently lead to animalistic tendencies. Okay, a soul without spirit, just relying on the body, will interpret reality through the body and thus turn into an animalistic human being. Okay, it will turn into an animalistic human being. All right, the spirit's influence on the soul likewise creates in the soul a corresponding mass. So the body and its impression upon the soul creates a mass called the ego. However, the spirit's influence upon the soul likewise creates a mask also, okay, which is the higher mind. Okay, the soul with influence from the body and the exterior environment creates the lower mind, the lower manas, okay, which is the ego, the lower ego. and the spirit's influence upon the soul will create the higher mask, the higher ego, okay? And unlike the ego that we all know, the higher mask represents the true face of spirit. Normally, when spirit identifies with lower ego, it's identifying with a mask that is diametrically opposed to its own nature and originates from the physical world that, given it an entity does have a spirit. Okay? But when spirit identifies with the mask of its own making, the super ego, then you have divinity personified. Okay, thus the soul has two extensions, the ego and the higher ego. Okay, the first is associated with human personality and computational reason, the latter with divine personality and higher reason, higher meaning transjective, abductive, Gnostic, and numinous. Okay, so you have the basic soul, which is split in two between the astral body and the etheric body, and then you have the extended soul, which is the spirit. You have the spirit, which is the highest. Then you have the astral body and the etheric body, which are two components of the soul, and within that circumference, within that circle, you have higher ego and lower ego. See, the only way that one can have a higher ego and a lower ego is if the spirit is involved. If the spirit is involved, then it takes that soul, which is split into two pairs, into two halves rather. Okay, and then the spirit thusly influences the soul, and the spirit's influence upon the soul is what is referred to as the higher ego. Okay, now the lower ego is the influence of the body in the world upon the spirit. Okay, so you upon the soul rather. So you have the soul that's in the middle. Okay, you have the soul that's in the middle. For the spiritless beings, they are only influenced and can only be influenced by the body in the world. Okay, so they are animalistic. Okay, those that do have a spirit have the potentiality for a higher ego, which is divinity personified. Okay, this is why commonly many people that we come in contact with just don't get it. We ask ourselves, why doesn't my family just not get it? Why don't people get this? To us it sounds simple. Why don't people get this? It's because they might be lacking that spiritual element, okay, that influences the soul and tries to bring the soul upward towards righteousness. Okay, but if someone doesn't have that spirit element, then there's nothing to bring that soul up into righteousness, so naturally they degenerate into wickedness. Okay, in life we as spirits choose which of these opposites to align with and nurture. Okay, so if you are a spiritual being, then you do have a choice. But if you are not a spiritual being, or if you do not have that spiritual element, then you do not have a choice. You are just animalistic. Okay, if we attune ourselves to spiritual influences and think transcendently, we increase the divine personality, which is the higher ego. If we absorb ourselves in materialism and predation and think only calculatively, we increase the lower personality. Spirit has the choice while incarnated which of these personalities to build up and step into. See, the reason why the world is degenerating is because there's more and more people that are being born spiritless. Okay, so naturally society is going to reflect that in wickedness, murder, you name it. Okay, so spirit has the choice. When one nurtures the divine personality and steps fully into it, fissioning away from the lower ego, then one becomes a spirit made personally manifest. Okay, now, and also dynamic too, because there are many people that are spiritless, but they operate under the auspices of being spiritual because of religion. Okay, religion is what religion is what helps camouflage the spiritless with the spiritual. Okay, because it teaches morality. Don't do this, don't do that, do this, do that. Okay, it teaches morality, and because of religion, it helps camouflage, or it helps manipulate and coerce people into thinking that they do have spirit, that they are spiritual. Okay, but religion is just dogma. It's just a set belief system. Okay, designed to keep the animals with some sense of higher ego, designed to keep them thinking, or keep them believing, or restrain them, rather. I think that's actually better. Religion actually helps restrain the expression of evil. So religion can be good in a way, okay, to those that are spiritless, but religion is always damaging to those that truly possess a spirit, to those that are truly spiritual. Okay, remember that. All right. Now, in relation to black and white, okay, if because you also have black people that you have black and white. Let's take the topic of black and white. Okay, if speaking specifically to black, okay, black. If a black man, black woman, etc., feeds the lower ego, it can lead to an extreme form of black nationalism, things along that nature. Okay, the obsession with being clique-ish. Okay, if a white person feeds the lower ego, it can lead to racist white supremacy, or contributing to a system of racist white supremacy. Okay, but realizing the truth, you realize that it's bigger than even black and white. Okay, it's about spirit. Okay, now spirituality does have a connection with black and white. It does have a connection with black and white, because when you talk about black and white, you're talking about indigenous people groups. You're talking about people groups that originated at a later set point in time. Okay, so when speaking of Gnosticism, you can't get away from the reality of black and white. Okay, Gnosticism is never it never excludes the issue of black and white. Okay, because when you're talking about the issue of black and white, you're talking about two totally separate and distinct races of beings. Okay, so whenever you're talking about two separate and distinct, totally distinct race of beings, then you're talking about something that's deep. Okay, you're talking about something that is deep. So it is always important to recognize the origin, and the true origin. I mean, if you really study history, not just the history that's given to us, but if you really study true facts in relation to the origin of black and white, you see that it does tie in to spirituality. So in a sense, Gnosticism is bigger than just simply black and white when it comes to white supremacy, black nationalism, whatever. But at the same time, it does encompass that, because within that within that scope exists answers to prevalent questions of why do things happen? Why are certain people groups held down? Why are certain people groups exalted? Okay, amongst all the wickedness that are going on. So even when I talk about Gnosticism, okay, it does encompass, and the issue of black and white is really important, and it does involve the understanding of the origin of not just the Caucasoid, but of the quote unquote black race. Because I really don't like using the word black, but because black is not a race, but it does encompass all of those things. Okay, and the information there too. All right, so I would just like to say that once again, today's date is June the 10th, 2014. This is a message really and essentially designed to explain Gnosticism, to explain what it's like to be a Gnostic. And what it's like to be a Gnostic is an initiate. Okay, it's gaining knowledge, and I'm not just talking about superficial knowledge. I'm not just talking about black nationalistic knowledge. I'm not just talking about white supremacy and that, and what comes with that and that knowledge. I'm talking about the totality of this existence. Because overall, if you don't understand or stand under the reality of the matrix, it doesn't matter if you're black or white, you're still going to be lost. And if you're still lost, how are you going to be saved? And also, I would just like to say that, I would like to give a list of references, because it will help you on your quest, in your journey for information and understanding. One reference is the Nag Hammadi library that you can read and cite. There are various different translations, but they're pretty much all the translations that I've came across have been pretty consistent. So you can just look up the Nag Hammadi library. You can also go to the Gnostic Bible, the Gnostic text of mystical wisdom from the ancient and medieval worlds by Willis Barnstone. That's Willis, Barnstone, Barnstone. You can go to a book by Annie Besant called Esoteric Christianity. Her name is Annie Besant. And she also wrote a book called Thought Forms, I believe, by Annie Besant. You can check out that Thought Form book and read, that will explain, that will go into the whole thought forms. What is a thought form? How do we create thought forms? What are the importance of thought forms? Okay, you can read a book. The title is Legends of the Gods by E.A. Wallace Budge. That's WALLISBUDGE. You can also go online and you can look up Gnosticism on Wikipedia, but just remember that it is Wikipedia. You can read a book titled Gnosis Tradition and Revelation by Rafael Vargas. That's Rafael Vargas, Rafael Vargas. You can also look up the Gnostic Handbook, which is written by the Institute for Gnostic Studies, I believe. But I know the title is the Gnostic Handbook. Okay, you can look up the Gnosis of Ancient Wisdom in the Christian Scriptures by William Kingsland. That's Kingsland. You can also look up a book called The Gnostics by Jacques Lacari. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. It's JACQUESLACARRIERE. Okay. You can also look up a book by that gentleman. You can read the book Pistis Sophia by G.R.S. Mead, MEAD. Okay. You can also look up a book by the name of The Lost Teachings of Jesus 2, Mysteries of the Higher Self by Elizabeth Clare Prophet. You can, as I said, you can check out the Nag Hammadi Library by James M. Robinson. Okay. You can also look up a book called The Gnostics by Tobias Curtin, which is TOBIASCHURTON. You can also look up a book called The Gnostic Religion, The Message of the Alien God in the Beginnings of Christianity by Hans Jonas, HANSJONAS. Okay. You can look up a book also called The Secret Books of the Egyptian Gnostics, an introduction to the Gnostic Coptic manuscripts discovered at Chenoboskian by Jean Dorsey, and that's JEANDORESSE. Let me see. What else can I give you all? Okay. The Early History of God, Yahweh and Other Deities in Ancient Israel. Okay, by Mark S. Smith. Okay. You can look up also a book called what else? What else? I have so many different different books here. You can look up what else? Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's pretty much it as that goes. But I just wanted to give you all some references that you can go and look up for yourselves and do some research for yourselves. So once again, my name is William Lee, aka the Grim Reaper, aka the Bad News Bear, and I'm signing off. Bye.